James Gunn, I'm so excited to hear from you. I'm sure you're very busy, what with the writers and actors striking, and you, a producer and a writer and a director and sometimes an actor. Don't forget you were in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 as that big blob. We've all seen the behind the scenes footage. It was very funny, but I'm sure you know more than anybody how hard this is on the writers and the actors and how much we need a fair deal soon. So I'm sure you're working on that, but I did get your message. We need to get your Guardians of the Galaxy friends into the new DCU ASAP, and I have some ideas. So we're going to do all that. We got the 8 main characters of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. We're going to talk about who they are, what they are good at, and which roles I think they should take in the new DCU. And also, in case you show this to anybody and they're like, hey, why are you casting all your friends in your movies? I don't know why this is such a thing that comes up with you specifically, like why people care so much. It's not like Quentin Tarantino shows up to the set of a new movie, looks at the call sheet and goes, wow, Samuel L. Jackson's in this one too. What a coincidence. I didn't plan this. It's not like right before Martin Scorsese calls action, he's like, by the way, your name, Leonardo DiCaprio. Have we worked together like 7 or 8 times before? I just forgot, but here you are by sheer coincidence on my movie. So isn't that a crazy coincidence? Like, you have made friends that you work with very well. You've made 3 of the best Marvel movies, one of the best DC movies of the last 10 years. Like, why is this a problem? And like, Jennifer Holland, your wife, is good in the Suicide Squad and is good in Peacemaker. I would understand if you were casting like all of your friends and family in roles they had no business being in. Like if Sean Gunn was Superman in the new DCU, like we might have a problem, but it has never been that. It has always been you casting people you work well with in parts that they fit in and making movies that we all like. So like, let's all get off your back about this, okay? Anyway, I've got 8 actors and I have 2 others I want to talk about real quick. First, let's talk about Sean Gunn, because I think we'll see him somewhere else in the new DCU as well. Sean Gunn already has not 1, but 2 roles in the new DCU in the same show. He is both the Creature Commando Weasel and also G.I. Robot. And yes, Weasel is mostly just squeaks and grunts, but if Robot gets a voice, that means Sean Gunn could portray him in live action. However, that role would probably end up being mostly CGI. So I could absolutely see Sean getting another role here. The thing is, a lot of his roles tend to be very situational. Like Kraglin is not a guy. He was barely a character before Guardians 1. So I imagine we'll get the same thing here. He'll be a member of the Time Masters, but not Rip Hunter. Or a pirate that Supergirl is chasing, but not Krem. We will see. And then the other actor who's not a main character in these Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but I absolutely think we will see in something quickly, is Greg Henry. He is the most consistent James Gunn friend besides Sean and Rooker. He's been in all of Gunn's big projects besides the Suicide Squad, and I'm sure he'll show up in one of these. I don't want to spend a ton of time on him because I imagine he's going to get the role he's very much settled into recently as someone's dad, but there are some options. He could be a Lionel Luthor or Lex Sr. or whatever, play it similar to Mitchum Huntsberger from Gilmore Girls. He could be General Sam Lane, Lois's father. He's played plenty of people in Authority, like cops, things like that. I'd buy him as a general. He could play Jimmy's surrogate father, Perry White, and he could probably play Pa Kent. It's going to be one of those 4. I'm leaning towards Pa Kent. We will see. All right, now that those 2 are out of the way, let's talk about the big 8. We're going to look at a couple things for each actor. We're going to talk about what roles they've played in James Gunn movies, what roles they've played in other movies. We're going to talk about how good of friends you are, just because I think that's important for justifying how much I think they'll all be in these movies. Then I'm going to go over a couple of runners up, and finally I will select a winner for each actor. Oh, and I talk about this one team a lot, and I realized after the fact I don't use the team's full name at all. It is called the Justice League International. It was basically a reboot of the Justice League after a lot of the main characters had to leave. So Wonder Woman, Superman, The Flash all had to leave the Justice League. So DC took a bunch of characters who were either doing their own thing or somewhat popular, but not like complete A-listers yet, and added them all together into one group. It is fantastic. So many comic fans will say this is their favorite lineup for the Justice League. I have a feeling you will too, but I mentioned the JLI a couple of times in this video, and that's what I'm talking about. JLI is Justice League International by Giffen, DeMatteis, and Maguire from the late 80s. So let's start with the first actor on this list, Pom Klementieff. Why are we starting with Pom here? Well, before we evaluate each actor, I want to look at one specific quality, their James Gunn friendship level. How close are they with James? Only to justify their place on this list, because I'm not putting every actor he's ever worked with more than once. And Pom is actually a great place to start. Palm was not only a major player in Guardians 2 and 3, is really the only new character introduced post Guardians 1 to graduate to main team member. She was also sort of the main character of the holiday special. Palm also had a cameo in The Suicide Squad as the singer in the Corto Maltese bar. Gunn clearly likes to work with Palm. She seems to be good friends with him too, according to an Instagram post. Everyone who has followed my feed for a while knows she is one of my favorite people in the world, and I feel incredibly fortunate to have her as a collaborator and a friend. Her talent blows my mind on a daily basis, and she makes me laugh always. You're the very best, Palm, and I love you dearly. I can't wait to see what we come up with next. Have an amazing day. According to Palm herself, she even has a role in the new DCU planned out. She said, quote, "I'm not going to tell you which character. No, we've been talking about it, and there's one specific character that he's thinking of, and I think it would be really, really awesome. And it would have me continue doing action too, so it's exciting." So this is a lock. The only actor I can find who has said that she and Gunn have had conversations about a specific character. But who should she play? Well, let's look at her strengths. Most people know Palm from one of two roles. She played Mantis in the second and third Guardians movies, as well as Infinity War and Love and Thunder and the Guardians Holiday Special. Palm also played the role of a character apparently named Paris, who is not made clear, but I'm going to assume is an evil mime from Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. So those two roles really drive home what I believe can be Palm's defining trait. She's weird. And I don't mean like Jughead weird. I mean she is superhuman levels of weird. She is a specialist with a weird power or vibe that might be able to stop the unstoppable hero or villain. We don't know, because she's so weird. Also, Palm seems to be a very physical actor, comfortable with a lot of stunt work. It's also worth noting that Palm is half Korean on her mother's side and half French/Russian on her father's side. So if we are sticking strictly to that ethnic identity, DC is slim pickings. Korean representation specifically is one area where Marvel has DC beat big. Besides Tiger Division, their new South Korean team, they've got Amadeus and Helen Cho, White Fox, and Luna Snow. But DC, not so much. So without stretching into just general Asian, Palm does not have any obvious roles based off being half South Korean. Runners up. We've got Frenchness, although there are less French DC characters than you'd expect too. Like there is Crimson Fox, a French superhero who is the main hero character on that show Powerless that might as well not exist. The show, not the character. Her backstory is kind of interesting and gets twisty in a way that is very close to another movie, so I'm not going to say it because it'd be a spoiler, but Crimson Fox is an option. Plastique, the Suicide Squad's demolition expert, is traditionally French-Canadian, but Palm could take that spot if they made another Suicide Squad movie or maybe a Secret Six thing. But also, who's itching for Plastique anytime soon? Then, if we're playing the Hollywood card where any Asian person can play a character from any Asian country, which listen, I'm not saying it's right, but if we are, that opens up a lot of doors, since so many DC heroes are Japanese. She could play Katana, Shadow. Palm could also play an older version of Cheshire and tap into her Frenchness. But the one that I think is most plausible in that situation is Dr. Light 2. Kimi Yohashi was an alternate reality version of the classic villain Dr. Light, who showed up during the Crisis on Infinite Earths and stuck around. She joined the JLI, the team I think James Gunn is going to build, as well as a bunch of other teams, and she's one of the more powerful DC characters using photokinesis the same way as all three Marvels put together. Would Gunn do the race swap? I'm gonna guess no. Besides being generally respectful, he's pretty plugged in and would see any potential backlash coming. But out of all of the Asian DC characters Gunn could introduce, Kimoyo seems like one at the top of the list. The winner. Okay, so is this the character who feels the most like Palm in the entire DC universe? Probably not. But some other casting decisions make her feel very right here. You see, a member of the Legion of Superheroes was recently reintroduced into the main DC universe via one of her ancestors getting trapped in an alternate dimension. She was trapped there for years until she eventually was rescued by a couple of heroes who got thrown into that dimension by accident. When they all got out, they were stuck together, so they reluctantly formed a team you've probably been hearing a lot about recently, the Terrifics. This team is the DC Fantastic Four pastiche, comprised of Mr. Terrific, the team's leader/super genius, Plastic Man, their quippy jokester, Metamorpho, the tough brawler, and the lone female member of the team, Phantom Girl. This is the role I think Palm eventually gets. Like I said, Phantom Girl was originally a member of the Legion of Superheroes, the DC Kid super team of the future, But one of her ancestors, Linyawazo, got sucked through a black hole as a child and marooned in a universe that was not unlike Marvel's Negative Zone. She was also rendered fully intangible during her stay there, and when she returned to Earth was forced to remain intangible because her touch made things explode. I think this is where Pom ends up. It's almost guaranteed that this character shows up soon, and her vibe is generally weird, kind of like a ghost. She's a little bit out there, a little otherworldly, spacey. I think Pom can do that really well, as we've seen in Mantis. And because her ability is phasing, she can have a very physical role, phasing through characters, kind of like Shadowcat should in a fight scene if they get her phasing under control and she's not just exploding things like she does in the comics. So for the first member of Gunn's friends in the new DCU, I'm going to say Pom Klementif would make an excellent Phantom Girl. Next up, I want to look at who is maybe the biggest star on this list, the very cool Chris Pratt. I wouldn't say Chris Pratt owes his career to James Gunn, since I do think he was doing well enough before Guardians 1, but man, if I were Chris Pratt, I would take absolutely any role James Gunn offered. And likewise, James Gunn definitely does not owe his career to Chris Pratt, but Pratt's performance in Guardians 1 made that movie. The two would not be where they are without the other. Pratt was also instrumental in getting James Gunn reinstated at Disney after he was fired for old tweets surfaced by a conservative blogger. According to a Hollywood Reporter article, Pratt organized a letter published in support of Gunn, had meetings with Kevin Feige about getting Gunn back for Guardians 3, and even texted Gunn Bible verses about how everything was going to be okay. So I'd say he's pretty high on the Gunn friendship list. And he has not been offered a specific part in the new DCU, but according to Gunn, Pratt, along with a couple of others, will probably end up in the new DCU. So what can he do? Chris Pratt plays what have come to be known as Chris Pratt types, to varying levels of success. Obviously, you have Star-Lord, which I think is as good as it's been. He's a cool, tough action guy who's also a dorky, sensitive man-child. Perfect 50-50 balance. Pratt also stars in the Jurassic World franchise as raptor trainer / dinosaur god Owen Grady. I would say this performance leads heavily on the cool tough guy side of the formula without developing the charm, but hey, those movies made $1 billion, so what do I know? Pratt also has a respectable voice portfolio. He was the lead in 2 Lego movies, Pixar's Onward, and of course, the Mario Brothers movie. In all of those, Pratt voices some version of a lovable everyman who characters in the movie repeatedly refer to as a loser. And again, $1 billion. In fact, as of right now, Pratt is the lead in the 2 highest grossing movies of this year. So, pretty good. And then Chris Pratt can also just do action star. That's what Tomorrow War was. That's what Terminal List seems to be. He's a good old American boy with a gun shooting his way to freedom or whatever those shows are about. And this also seems to work. Pratt got his start as Andy Dwyer on the NBC comedy Parks and Rec. He played pure lovable schlub there, not a hunk by any means, until his character got in shape for Guardians 1, although it was barely mentioned on the show. So what do we have here? Well, besides a Chris Pratt type, we have one thing: box office magic. Chris Pratt movies make money. Is it because of Pratt, or because he's cast in big giant franchises that would make money regardless? I don't know, but nobody on Earth currently has a track record as good as Chris's. For that reason, I think Pratt makes the most sense in a movie. This is business after all, and filming a series takes a lot of time. Pratt is in high demand. This isn't to say I don't think he would do a series, but it just doesn't seem like the optimal place for him. Defining characteristics: Chris Pratt is very middle America. He can play a character from Missouri as well as one from New York. That is valuable. He's also a hunk, one of a few big muscular guys who can also act. We'll need to utilize that. And he's funny. The runners up: could he play one of the A-listers? Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, Oliver Queen? I don't see it. He could be a solid Guy Gardner if that role was not already filled, but I don't think he's right for any of these other guys. I think Chris Pratt could be a solid Booster Gold. There, I said it. It's true. Is he my favorite? Hell no, he doesn't even crack my top 5. But it's not the doomsday scenario a lot of fans act like it is. He's charming, funny, looks like a football player, and, very important, is cool with being a dope. But I don't think it's happening since he's just got too much star power. If I were HBO, I'd get him into a theater ASAP. Grifter is a character I am somewhat familiar with through my Authority reading. He shows up in a handful of times near the end. I've read some of his solo comics since then, and here's what I know about him. Cole Cash is a grifter with some psionic powers who was recruited by the Wildcats, the Wildstorm premier superhero team. He is an angsty marksman, feels a lot like Red Hood or Winter Soldier. Now that does not scream Chris Pratt, but I could see the character being slightly reworked into a Star-Lord type. The grifting element of the character feels very Star-Lord. and he could definitely be the main character in a solo movie in the future after maybe getting his start in the Authority movie. I've always envisioned Mr. Miracle as an Oscar Isaac type, but he could also be Pratt. As we've seen in Guardians 3, Pratt can act, and this sort of role would be interesting. Also, Miracle is another JLI member who I expect we will see soon, but this doesn't really feel right. Call me crazy, but I think Chris Pratt could actually make a pretty solid elongated man. He's another stretchy guy, but less of a goofball than Plastic Man and less of a nerd than Mr. Fantastic. He's also sort of a blank slate. Like, obviously Ralph Dibny has a defined character, but not the same way as like Batman, where general audiences know exactly what they want. I do think Gunn could mess around with Elongated Man and turn him into more of a Chris Pratt type. Does that mean he should? Probably not, but it is an option. Secret Six feels like something that's on its way. Why not the protagonist of that book, Catman? He feels like Owen Grady, and of course Gunn would play this character a little goofier, so I think Chris Pratt could actually be a pretty good fit there. Also, he could work well with another Guardian who we will get to, the Winner. I think there's a case to be made for Chris Pratt playing an excellent Captain Atom, Nathaniel Adams. Pratt is buff, loves playing army dudes, and he has the look. I think Pratt could give Adams a little more charm than he sometimes has in the comics and turn him into a very popular character. And while Adams would make plenty of sense on a show like Waller, he could also slot in nicely onto a Justice League movie, or dare I say Justice League International movie. He has also crossed over with the Authority in the past. He would also work well with some of the Lanterns. I think this could be a role where Chris Pratt makes an appearance or two, pops in an episode of Peacemaker or something like that, before eventually starring in a movie. So for Chris Pratt, I'm gonna go with Captain Atom. Next up, let's take a look at one of your oldest friends, Michael Rooker. Michael Rooker has been here longer than anyone else on this list, with a leading role in Slither all the way back in 2006, and he's been a part of pretty much everything Gunn has worked on since, including Abe in Super, Vicky in Lollipop Chainsaw, which Gunn wrote, Yondu in the first and second Guardians movies, along with a cameo in the holiday special and an appearance in Guardians 3, Bud in the Belko Experiment, which Gunn also wrote, and Savant in The Suicide Squad. And in all of those, I believe he dies. Gunn loves killing Michael Rooker. The two are incredibly close friends, and there's no doubt Rooker shows up in the new DCU, according to Screen Rant. Rooker and Gunn met when the former auditioned for Slither, and they became fast friends after that, with Gunn adding that they, quote, see each other a couple times a week. Gunn also shared that he has cast Rooker in all his projects because he likes to surround himself with people he really cares about in order to have, quote, some amount of affection around you while filming. Though he later added that it's also because Rooker is a, quote, madman, with Rooker explaining he, quote, sees things differently. Defining characteristics. Alright, you guys know Michael Rooker is a kind of guy, traditionally plays southern tough guys who sometimes have a heart of gold. Walking Dead's Merle was the tough southern guy part. Yondu was that, plus heart of gold. He's been working since the 90s with parts in movies like JFK, Days of Thunder, and Tombstone, so he's got more range than just mean father figure, but that's sort of what he's settled into recently with characters like Yondu, or Fast Saga's Buddy, or Love and Monsters' Clyde. I'm willing to bet that's where he ends up here. The runners-up. Perry White is a father figure to all the Cubs at the Bugle, and he can be tough as nails when he needs to. I can absolutely see Gunn casting Rooker as the editor of the Daily Planet in his first big new DCU movie. Also, if we want to give Rooker a small but memorable role, Bibbo Babowski is the sailor turned bar owner in Metropolis's Suicide Slums. He's a gruff character with a big gregarious personality. I can absolutely see Rooker trying to punch Superman in a movie. The only problem with those two is they're probably going to live through the series, and that just won't do. So let's look at some Expendables. One of my favorites is Dead Man, Boston Brand. The short story is Boston was a trapeze artist who was killed and needed to solve his own murder. He's a mainstay on the Justice League Dark as the team's sort of clown. In all of the animated material, he's got an accent like he's from Boston or New York, but I could see this character getting a rework. Make him southern and older and saltier. Having Rooker play the deadest character feels right up there with giving Nathan Fillion the bowl cut. And I do see Boston showing up in something like Swamp Thing eventually. But there is another, the Winner. You see, you can only kill Dead Man once, but the Resurrection Man, you can kill him forever. He's a relatively obscure character compared to the rest of these guys, but he has some wonderful qualities. First, he is actually southern, from South Carolina. Great start. Second, he's a member of a team called the Forgotten Heroes, made up of obscure characters from DC's past that included Rick Flag and Animal Man, who I firmly believe will be in a show sometime soon. In fact, I could see Resurrection Man being the vigilante to Animal Man's Peacemaker, and Gunn loves obscure weird comic characters. His power is also fun. Resurrection Man has the power to never stay dead, like Mr. Immortal, the character he's loosely based on. But every time he dies, Resurrection Man is brought back to life with a new superpower, so you never know what you're gonna get. I don't think Resurrection Man is a character we'll definitely see in the future of the new DCU, but I do think he is the perfect character for Michael Rooker. Now it's time to look at the big boy. Dave Bautista, the Widowmaker, the Torso Taker, Drax the Destroyer. Maybe not Gunn's longest friend, but definitely one of his most loyal. I would put his Gunn friendship level at ride or die. Dave Bautista was the most vocal member of the crew after Gunn was fired by Disney. In an interview with Collider, Bautista explained, "At the time, it was awful. I got beat up, and I got bashed, and I got threatened, and I was in a bad spot with Disney as well, but I just felt like I was doing the right thing. I felt like a friend. A guy who really went out on a limb for me and kind of changed my life was being unfairly attacked." Bautista explained. "He was unfairly attacked and then he was unfairly punished. I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't say anything. But at the time it was awful. It was awful. I literally stayed on social media at that time even though I was just getting bashed and beaten up. I stayed on it because I knew if nobody was speaking up for him, there was just no chance. This was part of the political climate. Things that were going on. It was just like even much bigger than James. This was a big message they were sending. This was a personal, political attack on James Gunn. So yeah, good friend and solid actor. Perhaps not the best of the giant Hollywood muscle men, although the one I consider the best had his best performance come from a James Gunn vehicle. So it's very possible that if Bautista got his own Peacemaker, he could take the crown from Cena. Since leaving wrestling for acting, Bautista has taken roles in Blade Runner 2049, Spectre, and Army of the Dead. And even though Bautista was in all 3 Guardians movies and Christmas specials and Infinity War and Love and Thunder, he did not get a spot on the Suicide Squad because of conflicts with filming Army of the Dead. And maybe that's for the best. Now he's free and doesn't have any baggage. We don't need to worry about recasting him from his small The Suicide Squad part or anything like that. The sky is the limit. Defining characteristics. Okay, big one out of the way. Bautista is big. Big old boy. And we need plenty of big old boys for these universes full of the biggest of boys. However, this does create some issues. We've seen Superman. Could Bautista be Lex? Should Lex be that much bigger than an adult Superman? Personally, I don't think so. Not every actor can play every part, especially considering there are some characters that are very large and can still be complex, fulfilling roles in the new DCU. This isn't just brass body again. He's also funny. I don't want to forget that. Bautista is good at playing intense, quiet guys who can turn that energy into a solid joke. So that's worth keeping in mind here. Also, Bautista is an interesting mix, not one I would have guessed. He's half Filipino and half Greek. So we're keeping that in mind too. The runners up. Like, okay, Greek, a god perhaps? Could he be Zeus in Paradise Lost? Or Hades? Or Hercules? Apparently, this series has some basis in the new Wonder Woman Historia book, which features some of the characters from Greek mythology. Bautista could take one of those roles. On the Filipino side, you remember how Korean was Slim Pickens? Well, Filipino is slimmer, with only one character really coming up, Earth 2's Citizen Steel. So I don't think he's a priority or a particularly interesting pick. So let's look at some of the muscle men. Like, assuming Bautista will be one of the largest guys in this universe, which characters will be some of the largest guys in the new DCU? And the ones who have something to do besides grunt? Well, you've got Bane. This is the most popular Bautista fan cast. And listen, he'd be good. And Bautista himself had lobbied for the role for many years. However, recently he said in an interview with GQ that the door to that role is more or less shut. Quote, "I have conversation with James about that, but I think the direction he's leaning in, completely rebooting the whole universe, he's starting from scratch and starting younger and fresher, and I think you need to do that." Now listen, could be a lie or could just be wrong. But I have a feeling if Bautista is saying this, he sort of made peace with it. Seems like Bane is going to last for a while, and Bautista is 54. Like, Bane should be a main player in a Batman story, and then a Secret Six story, and then maybe another Batman story as an ally. I understand Bautista's reservations, but that should not count him out of one of these roles entirely. There are some one-offs or characters that could work for a while with an older actor. Like, okay, I know he's sort of Draxy, but you want a tough spacefaring mentor who isn't a buffoon? You've got the Green Lantern's drill sergeant, Kilowog. With Guy Cast and Hal and John showing up in Lanterns, I would not be surprised if some space lanterns start making appearances, and Kilowog is everyone's favorite. Now this would likely be a motion capture performance, which would be a nice change from being covered in lots of paint and silicone. Batista seems like he needs a break. I also think Batista could make a fun villain, and DC has tons of humongous villains. The obvious one is Darkseid. I know Snyder fans would riot if they recast Darkseid, but they probably love Batista from Army of the Dead, so maybe it could play. Darkseid is terrifying and big, one of a handful of characters who needs to be larger than Superman. And yes, he could be CGI like Thanos, but basing that on a guy who's already really big could help, especially with the physicality of the performance, not having him be on stilts all the time. Also, I really believe James Gunn is going to do a Mr. Miracle thing, so even if we're not introducing Darkseid for Justice League, he would need to be a player there. But let's look at some other characters from movies we know are on the horizon. After all, it might be a while before we see Darkseid, who is almost guaranteed to show up. What about some good guys? Like the OMAC. Big giant blue Hulk with a mohawk. And yes, I know technically Blue Beetle has an OMAC, but it's a title like G.I. Joe, stands for One Man Army Corps. So a fresh take on OMAC makes sense in another thing down the line. Maybe Booster Gold? But while Batista has a good OMAC look, I don't know if he could pull off the mild-mannered Kevin Ko thing. It seems like in that case you'd want to cast a smaller guy and bulk him up like Ruffalo's Hulk. But okay, are there any characters from movies that are on the horizon that we know are coming? Like, would Batista be a good Swamp Thing? He can do stoic, he's got the frame, the voice. And I imagine this would be more of a costume or mostly motion capture, so it won't necessarily be as much of a burden. And since it is so much of a mantle, being held by very different people who all turn into the same kind of Swamp Thing guy, Batista being the pre-monstrification Swamp Thing can be explained pretty easily. Like, he can still be the Alec Holland version that we're probably getting, but I guess this doesn't need to be like Kevin Ko, where before he becomes a superhero, he's a meek scientist. Alec Holland can also be a big old guy. And this character is important. Like, I imagine Swamp Thing will be a big part of this Gods and Monsters phase. So James needs someone he can trust, someone committed. And Batista has earned James' trust over the years, the winner. My pitch for Batista is the character that The Rock should have played from the start instead of Black Adam. The ruler of Warworld and Superman villain known only as Mongol. He's half Grandmaster and half Thanos, a tyrant who holds intergalactic gladiator tournaments and also likes to mix it up himself from time to time. Unlike Darkseid, Mongol can have a lot of personality, charisma, like Jeff Goldblum's Grandmaster. I honestly think this role could be super fun for Batista. And it could be a one-and-done villain role, or he could be a big villain for the entire phase. DC just put out their Justice League Warworld cartoon. Who's to say that's not how their second Justice League movie ends? So I'm going to say that while Batista could be a great Swamp Thing, I believe he is in the perfect place for Mongol. So that is half of the team. Let's look at the other half, starting with Karen Gillan. Karen is a new member of the crew, but I feel like considering how much her performance in the Guardians movies evolved, she's someone Gunn trusts and wants to see more of. But besides the Guardians movies, she doesn't have a ton of history in other Gunn stuff, so I do think we'll see her somewhere, but she's less of a lock than some of these other guys. But beyond Guardians, Gillan has proved herself to be a more than capable movie star as a big part of the very successful action comedy Jumanji movies, and the lead in movies like Gunpowder Milkshake, and co-lead in the series Selfie, which was really good and didn't get enough attention at the time. And she was in some British medical show, Doctor Something, I don't know. Defining characteristics. So one of the most interesting things about Gillan is most of her big roles, Jumanji, Selfie, the Doctor thing, she plays a very different character than Nebula. Where Nebula is very serious and quiet, your typical Karen Gillan character frequently is energetic and fun, emotional, silly, so she does have a lot of range. And if you've watched the British Medical Show or seen an interview with her, you'll know she's also Scottish, although really good at hiding it. She's also a redhead, but unfortunately there are no redheaded comic characters, oh well. She's also pretty tall, like 5'11". Not that it really matters, but I always forget that when I see her on the red carpet and remember she's like half a foot taller than Zoe Saldana. When Gillan was asked which character she might want to play, she said, "Oh my god, I would love to go over to DC to work with James. I mean, that would be so fun and he's like my favorite filmmaker," she said before speculating on which role she might like to take on. I mean, there's loads. Honestly, if he wanted me to play like a two-headed alien that didn't have any lines and was just in the background out of focus, I would say yes. Wait, really? I don't know why I'm talking myself into more prosthetics, actually, she laughed. Scratch that, I want to play Poison Ivy. The runners up. Before we get to Ivy, I want to say Karen is Scottish and there's really only one door that opens up. Silver Banshee. And I know what you're thinking. Banshee? Wouldn't she be Irish? You'd think so, and the original Silver Banshee, Siobhan McDonnell, was, but the next Silver Banshee, Siobhan Smythe, was apparently from an island between Ireland and Scotland, so technically it could play. I don't love it, although I could see her just playing an American version of Silver Banshee. Banshee's a Superman villain after all, and eventually Superman is probably going to need to run into some of them. But okay, Poison Ivy. I could see a version of Brave and the Bold where Gunn introduces a Batman with a full rogues gallery, and we see all of them, including Pam. Now, the thing about Ivy, although she was not originally, she's become like the second highest profile lesbian or bisexual, or however she identifies, character in DC Comics, only behind Harley Quinn. 5 years ago, I think you can do a straight Ivy, but now I think fans will want an actual lesbian or bisexual actor, like a Megan Fox or an Evan Rachel Wood. That's just my read. Luckily, there are plenty of other redheads she could play, because I looked it up and there are apparently many redheaded characters in comics. You got Barbara Gordon, although I think she's too old. Kate Kane, but they'll probably want someone else for representational purposes. Miss Martian, she's too old. Starfire, also too old. Then there are the two I like. So first you got Knockout. Big redheaded brawler who's a member of the Secret Six. Also lesbian, but not as high profile as Batwoman or Poison Ivy, so I think it would slide. And she's supposed to be tough. Could be a good mix of everything Gillen is good at. And she's also tall. But then, the winner. Did not expect to get here this fast. Listen, if she bulked up a little, put on some muscle, Karen Gillan could be a great Artemis. And we know Paradise Lost is coming. And if what they've said is true and Diana is not the main character, Artemis makes a lot of sense. She was Diana's replacement in the very edgy 90s, and she made it back into the mainstream as a member of the Outlaws. She is an Amazon who works hard, plays hard, and carries a big axe. Attitude-wise, she is very Nebula, but with the look of Gillen. It's too good. So, Karen Gillan is my Artemis. I mean, I keep using the word team, but what I really mean is family, because we gotta talk about Vin Diesel. The movies. It is easy to forget that Vinny Diesel is in these Guardians movies, but he is, as Groot, one of the most popular characters in the entire MCU, or at least the most marketable, and he loves James Gunn. I'm just gonna read you this story word for word because it's too funny. This comes from CBR. While discussing their castmates' quirks with Entertainment Tonight, Chris Pratt, Karen Gillan, and Pom Clementif brought up Diesel's love of sending heartfelt videos to his friends during the holidays, which Pratt called kind of random but also very beautiful and earnest. At the time, however, Diesel did not realize Gunn changed his phone number, so his video went to a random individual in Las Vegas, who responded with a seemingly suicidal text message. This, Pratt and Gillan recalled, led Diesel to, quote, call Zoe Saldana and was like, we gotta charter a plane. We're going to Vegas to save James Gunn. So that's a good friend. I'll say he's a James Gunn friend level incredible. And Gunn appreciates it. And you know what? Vin Diesel is also a humongous megastar with billions in fast movies under his belt, so I think it's very likely that James Gunn offers Vin Diesel a role in the new DCU. Defining characteristics. Vin is an international star, another just hugely famous person who pretty much everyone on Earth knows. And it's mostly because of the Fast and Furious movies, which is pretty impressive. Vin likes being a big guy. He's one of those movie stars who seems to enjoy being cool and tough, so our character needs to have a physical presence. Not necessarily like a Duke Nukem type, but someone who nobody can miss. Vin also has a deep voice. Sometimes it's borderline impossible to tell what he's saying, but it's a booming voice that lends itself to big performances, most notably as the Iron Giant. Vin loves family. It's a meme, but hey, might as well go with it. And Vin Diesel played a human tree. Are there any of those in the new DCU? The winner. Is it too silly? Too on the nose? Not in a universe where Nathan Fillion is playing Guy Gardner. Because if we're looking for a role coming soon that fits Vin Diesel's very specific skill set, he'd be a fun Swamp Thing. Vin has the frame, the voice, and the heart to make Swamp Thing work. It's a more sinister version of Groot, and Vin Diesel would make international audiences immediately interested in this Swamp Thing movie, which does happen to be one of the more obscure properties in Chapter 1, so that's important. Do I think this role requires the Daniel Day-Lewis of actors here? No, we need somebody big who will commit and put asses in seats, and those are qualities that Vin Diesel has in spades. That's why Vin Diesel is my Swamp Thing. Speaking of CGI characters, let's talk about the actor who voices one of the most popular CGI characters I can think of in recent memory, and it seems like one that you like the most, Rocket Raccoon, voiced by Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper was the last one of these I wrote. Why? Because he's so hard to pin down. I imagine most of us were introduced to Cooper through either Wet Hot American Summer or The Hangover, even though right before The Hangover, Cooper starred as the villain in Wedding Crashers. But if you look at that resume, what is Bradley Cooper? He's a comedy guy. In movies with Will Ferrell, Paul Rudd, and Vince Vaughn. And in 2 of those, he played some version of the handsome jerk alongside a bunch of comedians. And then Hollywood gets wind of Cooper from Hangover and he gets a couple of action guy roles. Limitless, The A-Team. Cooper starts doing what guys like McConaughey were doing at the time. He even auditioned for Green Lantern, although ultimately lost to Ryan Reynolds. So it's like, okay, he's that. He's an action guy who dips into comedy every so often. But then, here comes David O. Russell with Silver Linings Playbook and American Hustle, and boom, Bradley Cooper is an Oscar darling. Gets nominated for both of those and American Sniper, which people forget was in the US the 6th highest grossing movie of that year, right under Fast 7 and above Minions. So this became Bradley Cooper. Then he goes and writes, directs, and stars in A Star Is Born, and he's locked in. Bradley Cooper is a serious movie guy, like Christian Bale or Matthew McConaughey later. Right in the middle of that, before American Sniper, Cooper lands the role of Rocket Raccoon in Guardians 1, and since then has voiced the character 9 times if you count all of his cameos and the Disney ride. And yet, I do not think most people associate Bradley with that role. And it isn't like he's hiding from it or anything. I mean, he doesn't do press, but his name's all over the posters. He's just not what we expect when we think of that kind of guy. Like a silly voice guy who does talking raccoon, because Bradley Cooper is serious. And that's why I think Cooper works so well. He's able to fully commit and infuse an unusual amount of depth into those performances. So while he is not always remembered as Rocket, Rocket is remembered. Cooper also seems to be very committed to Gunn, saying, when asked about a role in the new DCU, "I go wherever James Gunn tells me, and Peacemaker was just an incredible series." There were even rumors that Cooper was in the running for Lex Luthor, although those have apparently been shot down. So Cooper is loyal, he's versatile, and he's committed. Where does he fit? Essential characteristics. Bradley Cooper is handsome, like movie star handsome, leading man handsome, which is good because he's also a great actor. That opens up a lot of doors. Bradley Cooper characters break down mentally. Silver Linings Playbook, American Sniper, A Star Is Born, Nightmare Alley, Rocket Raccoon. His characters seem confident and together, and eventually it is revealed that they are thoroughly broken. Sometimes they pick themselves up, and sometimes they don't. But either way, they are complex characters. Bradley Cooper characters also scheme. Nightmare Alley, The A-Team, Wedding Crashers, Guardians, American Hustle, Limitless. Bradley Cooper is cunning. Not necessarily in an evil way, but in a this guy knows some stuff way. He's smart. Sometimes even a mastermind. Bradley Cooper also seems humble. He'll do whatever feels right. Comedy, drama, action blockbusters. He is not above parts that other actors may overlook. The runners-up. I'll be honest, I really would love to see his Luthor. He's got the right mix of intensity and charm that makes Lex Luthor work. But let's look at some other ones. Like, do we give him another shot? Would Bradley Cooper actually be a great Hal Jordan? This time, a little older, more experienced, perhaps jaded. We don't know exactly what we're getting in Lanterns, but I imagine it's something along those lines, and I can see Cooper pulling that off well. Or could Silver Linings Playbook sort of work as a Mr. Miracle audition? Similar themes, both scruffy everymen, and don't forget, Mr. Miracle is JLI, so it could work. Hell, could Bradley Cooper play Batman? I don't know, maybe. The only thing he doesn't scream is dad, although maybe that's exactly why we need him here. This Batman is not supposed to be a dad, but he ends up being one anyway. I doubt Bradley Cooper would take what would end up being the 2nd or 3rd most important new DCU role, but I think he could do it. And that goes for some of the Rogues Gallery. Joker? Yeah, I think so. Two-Face? Absolutely. Riddler, Mr. Freeze, all of them are plausible picks for Cooper, depending on which characters Gunn wants in Brave and the Bold. Could Bradley Cooper play Brainiac? Tap into some of that Limitless experience. Cooper can play cold, calculating, and maniacal. Or is there a Rocket Raccoon in DC Comics? And by that I mean a CGI character with attitude. Well, you've got JLI and Alien Lantern Gnort. Now, I wouldn't say he's got what I would call Bradley Cooper energy, but that's also true of Rocket Raccoon. I mean, Cooper could probably voice a couple of non-human lanterns like Chip or Salak, Toma Ray, or in live action, he could even be Sinestro. Like, tell me you fully don't see it. Yeah, I know we're all upset about Mark Strong, but Bradley Cooper might also be a good fit. Listen, casting Bradley Cooper is tough since he's got a lot of range and there are plenty of characters he could play. Green Arrow? Maybe. Thawne? Sure. Vandal Savage? That could probably work. Hell, he could play the horse Supergirl is in love with. But speaking of that, the winner. Okay, so Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow hinges upon Supergirl's pursuit of a space pirate assassin guy named Krem, who Kara encounters on an alien planet with a red sun. After he kills a bunch of locals, then he shoots Crypto and leaves on Kara's spaceship. So Kara follows him with the help of a precocious child whose father was also killed by Krem. Krem is just a monster, a pure jerk. Not an idiot, but a bastard. I think this could be a fun role for Cooper. Get back to his Wedding Crashers roots, playing an absolute scumbag who taunts Supergirl for 8 issues of a movie. And the part could be a ton of fun. Krem has more than enough personality to make this worth Cooper's time. And if he wants another shot at another character down the line, then we can talk about Gnort. But for now, Bradley Cooper would make a great Krem. So let's end this with not only one of the original members of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but also one of the most financially successful actors of all time, Zoe Saldana. I know I said Chris Pratt is box office magic, but if that's true, Zoe Saldana is box office sorcerer supreme. She's the only actor in all of the top 3 highest grossing movies ever made. As of this recording, we'll see how Craven does. But Zoe is a certified star who most people probably know from her role as Gamora in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. She also plays Neytiri, the main Na'vi from Avatar, but I bet if you ask the random person on the street to name a movie with Zoe Saldana, you'd get way more Guardians than Avatar because of all the CGI cat alien stuff. But Zoe Saldana has made other movies that are not part of ultra mega successful franchises. For instance, she was in Star Trek. Saldana played Lieutenant Uhura in 3 Star Trek sequels, 2 of which were big hits and 2 were pretty good movies, and no, it is not the same 2. She was also a lead in a handful of successful action movies, including The Atom Project, Columbiana, and The Losers, a movie that is pretty fun. Saldana also has an impressive voice resume. She starred in the My Little Pony movie, The Book of Life, Missing Link, Vivo, and Maya and the Three. And let's not forget, Saldana was also in a ton of iconic movies from the early 2000s that we all forget she was in, like Nick Cannon's Drumline, or The Terminal where she married Andor, or my favorite example of these 3, the Britney Spears star vehicle, Crossroads. Zoe's done it all. And Zoe is a good friend of James Gunn. I'll put her Gunn friend level at solid. For instance, Gunn said in an interview with Yahoo when asked about the response to his firing from Marvel, "But the things I think of that come from that time are the love I got from my family and friends. I think of how Zoe Saldana and her husband came over to fix me a meal the night after it happened. How Karen Gillan and Pom Clemente came over just to hang out with me, to be my friend." So yeah, she's not mean tweeting, but she's supportive. And if she wants one, I think Gunn would be crazy not to give Zoe a role in the new DCU. Defining characteristics. Zoe Saldana is first and foremost an action star. I would say she's known for her roles in big action blockbusters, jumping around with a sword or a bow and chopping guys' heads off. She's also from New Jersey, which makes her a good person. North Jersey to be specific. I can't speak for the morality of South Jerseyans. And even though, if I had to guess, I'd say she was Colombian because her movie was called that, Saldana is actually Puerto Rican and Dominican. She's also frequently tied to space. Guardian, Star Trek, Avatar. She's not always an alien, she's not always human, but she's always on a spaceship or another planet getting up to stuff. Only other thing I want to throw out there, Zoe Saldana almost always falls in love in her movies. Avatar, Guardians, The Terminal, From Scratch, The Atom Project. Saldana has experience playing a tough action hero who also has a sensitive side. The runners up. Alright, we've got some fun ones here. Like, let's say they do all the Bird Women, we get Hawkgirl and Swift. Why not throw in Menagerie, the winged member of Manchester Black's Elite? Saldana can do Fierce. I mean, if anything, this role is sorta too small for Zoe. If we're looking at Hispanic DC heroes, you've got a couple. Superman has a villain named Encantadora, who's pretty much his Poison Ivy. Dawnstar is another bird person, this one from the Legion of Superheroes, so Zoe's probably aged out of that one. Jessica Cruz is a high-profile human Green Lantern, so she could absolutely show up in Lanterns. The trouble there is that I always read Jessica is on the younger side, not quite Young Justice, but college-aged, so she's also probably not right for Zoe. But then you've got Aztec. There have been a couple of Aztecs, but the one that would fit Zoe is the Naeli Constant version. Basically, Aztec is like Moon Knight, but for Mesoamerican mythology mixed with Nova. A magic helmet makes you the avatar of Quetzalcoatl and gives you some superpowers. I do not feel like this role is super high profile either. Aztec could show up on the Justice League, but unless James Gunn is working on a Freedom Fighter series, I don't see how Aztec has enough presence to justify this being Zoe Saldana's one role. Saldana could also make an appearance on Paradise Lost. She could be this universe's Hippolyta or Hesperia. She's tough, physical, and the Amazonians might as well be aliens. If you're wondering, hey, does DC Universe have a Gamora? It does, and it's Grail. She's the daughter of Darkseid and an Amazon who fled Paradise Island. Grail was born at the same time as Diana, so she's kind of meant to be the evil apocalypse version of Wonder Woman. They even sort of dress the same. And she's super evil, because she is related to Darkseid. Only reason this one is not super viable is because I don't know if we see her anytime soon. Like, she could show up in Paradise Lost, but that's pretty early for the introduction of someone that strong, and tied to Darkseid, a villain I don't think we're gonna see immediately. You gotta work up to him. Could Saldana be a fun Zatanna? I kinda think so. We've seen she's got style, she can be funny. Do I think she's the perfect pick? Not really, but I could see that casting happening. And while I would say Zoe has big Barda energy, she is not exactly big. She's 5'6". But if you look at Neytiri or even Gamora, the archetype is there. A tough warrior woman taking care of a weaker, sometimes silly man. And I don't know what we do about big without CGI, since I'm not convinced Debicki or Gwendolyn Christie are quite big Barda types either. Maybe we just need to use camera tricks or CGI. The winner. Oh boy, could this be a fun one. Okay. So I'm not going to spoil what might be one of my favorite books of the last couple of years, but Tom King, Mitch Gerrard's, and Evan Shaner's Strange Adventures is itching to be a single season limited series. It's a short story filled with politics, intrigue, murder, sex, and oh hey, who's the main character? Oh yeah, Mr. Terrific. And one of the other main characters of this whole thing is Adam Strange's wife, Alana Strange. Alana hails from the planet Rann, which I would describe as sort of like DC's version of Hala, the Kree homeworld. The people of Rann are a civilized humanoid race that are constantly at war with everyone. There was a Rann-Thanagar war, a Rann civil war, and of course a war with the Pict Empire. The adventurer Adam Strange shows up on Rann sort of like Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon and falls in love with Alana, and the two become married and do adventures together. The comic that I think they should adapt, 2020's Strange Adventures, is about a murder in the aftermath of the Rann-Pict war that makes Adam look super guilty, so the Justice League needs Mr. Terrific to investigate Adam and Alana's past on Rann. It is really, really good. And Zoe would be a great Alana. She's a tough warrior with a dark side who no one can quite pin down. I know it doesn't seem like a high-profile role deserving of Zoe's talents, but trust me, Alana Strange would be a great part. So I think James should entrust that role to Zoe Saldana. So those are my picks. I hope you enjoyed all the characters I chose, and I cannot wait to see all of their names in Variety in the next couple of months, obviously once the writers and actors strike is settled fairly. Speaking of the Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor's friends, I want to talk about my next video. A couple of weeks ago, Taika Waititi talked about his plans for a 5th Thor movie, so I tried to figure out what a Thor 5 could look like. And I have come up with a pitch that I think is great. It covers a story from the comics that I think fits in really well now, and it is able to integrate some characters that I expect will surprise people. And that will be on YouTube eventually, but if you want to watch it right now, you can find it on this video's sponsor, Nebula. All of my videos go up on Nebula early and ad-free, so you can see my newest videos like this Thor 5 pitch before anybody else does. You can also watch videos from all kinds of cool people like Patrick Willems or Captain Midnight, and so many more. Plus, there's lots of stuff you will only find on Nebula. It's an incredible platform, and again, it has this Thor 5 pitch right now. I cannot stress that enough. And there is a very interesting new deal, just for the month of September. After that, it's going to go away probably for a while. It might be back, it might not, but for this month, you can get a lifetime membership to Nebula. So this will stick around for as long as you and Nebula do. You pay $300 once and have Nebula forever. You're probably wondering, why are they doing this? Basically, it's all about growing the platform in terms of making the app better, but also investing more in Nebula originals, whether that's original documentaries or plays, or even more narrative stuff like movies or shorts. It is all on the table. Now, I bet you're wondering, is this the best deal? Not really. That's still the annual subscription. If you are looking for the best possible price, definitely go with annual. Lifetime is about supporting the creators and helping us make even bigger projects today. And that's not my passive-aggressive way of saying, like, if you want to save money, you go annual. But if you really love us, none of that. That's just what the difference is all about. So if you sign up using my link that is on screen now or in the description, you can get a lifetime subscription to Nebula. And obviously, that is not for everyone, so there's still the annual plan for $30 a year, which is 40% off the regular price. So sign up now for the lifetime membership or the annual membership and watch my Thor 5 pitch. That's all I got. Thank you to everybody who continues to support the channel on Patreon, everybody that watches these videos on Nebula, everybody that listens to my podcast, mostly Nitpicking, everybody that follows me on Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Nando V Movies, all those platforms. Goodbye.